did human beings come to be what they are? And what are they? That is what I asked.
Sigmund Freud asked these questions again and again and found answers that men had not found before. His answers affected our lives in the deepest and most personal ways. Right or wrong, Freud changed forever man's image of himself.
Mankind has always known that there was spirituality. I had to show them that there were also instincts.
Against the 19th century belief in man's godlike omnipotence, Freud upheld the stark truth of human nature. The world was never again the same.
My life work was the exploration of man's unconscious mind. That raging inner sea of hidden memories, primitive drives, and unthinkable desires. Unless we understand these blind instincts of aggression and sexual desire, we live in a world of illusion, acting out our roles in a tragic shadow play.
His study of the unconscious mind profoundly exposed the less human elements in human nature. Even today, his ideas are startling and radical, and instinctively we are afraid of them.
If, ladies and gentlemen, you have come here expecting to hear something sensational or even lewd, you may be sure your efforts were not worth the trouble. I have been called lewd and sensational and much worse. You see, people are afraid of my ideas, and when they're afraid, they strike out. But I have long known that I was destined to trouble the sleep of the world.
What was this world whose sleep Freud troubled? In the 50 years before World War I, man was convinced he was moving toward his final perfection. In this new age of science, he was little plagued by doubts. It was Sigmund Freud more than any other man who disturbed this smug optimism. Freud's native city of Vienna was as self-satisfied as any in Europe. He came from a large, lower middle-class Jewish family. Until he was almost 40, he led a fairly conventional life. His specialty as a young doctor was research into the nervous system, and he became the leading authority in Europe on paralysis in children. He was a scientist, trained to think of the body as a machine.
My generation of doctors was brought up to respect only anatomical, physical, and chemical factors in illness. Psychological factors met with indifference or apathy.
Because of this apathy, methods of treating mental illness were crude. Doctors looked only for physical causes and used physical treatments. Then Freud left his laboratories. He found that his private patients did not fit these prescribed patterns.
They came here, dozens of women, day after day over the years, with paralysis, Severe pain, constant vomiting, hallucinations, severe disturbances of sight and speech. Naturally, I looked for physical causes, but could find none. Yet they suffered intensely. Doctors called these patients hysterics and despised them. They were shamming or imagining their symptoms. What could one do? Joseph Breuer, a friend and colleague, had some success with hypnosis. One of his patients talked freely about her past, and somehow her paralysis and difficulties of speech and vision would be improved. Well, we know now it was not the hypnosis. I soon discarded that. It was talking about painful memories that was the effective element. And these memories seemed to be deeply hidden in my patients' minds. Madame, can you think of anything? Anything at all? Yes, continue.
A word has just occurred to me.
Single word.
Yes. Oh, it's too silly.
Well, say it all the same.
Concierge.
Nothing else?
No. Nightgown.
Yes?
Bed.
What else? I remember I got the impression of a demon striving not to come to the light of day because that would be the end of him.
Town.
Town, yes. And?
Farm cart.
Yes. 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 Yes.
When I was 10, and my sister was 12, she went raving mad one night and had to be tied down and taken into town in a farm cart. It was the concierge who overpowered her and took her to the asylum.
But I sensed there was something hidden even deeper than that story. So I continued to press for words and to uncover the memories that truly disturbed my patient. Madame, I'm afraid that victory was too easy. I'm convinced that we have only part of the story. Think of another word.
Secret.
You had a secret with your sister?
Asleep. Together.
Yes.
Man.
Yes.
Naked.
And who was this man who came by night to you and your sister? Was he a relative? Was it your...
Yes! Yes!
If our unconscious minds, unknown to us, have the power to cripple us or blind us, how powerful that unconscious must be, and how important.
And so Freud began his historic voyage into the nature of our unconscious minds, the mind that had puzzled man for so long. But it was at first a stormy voyage. In 1896, Freud spoke to doctors in Vienna on the sexual origins of hysteria.
There was silence. It was as if there was a wall around me. The chairman was brief.
It sounds like a scientific fairy tale.
Then the insinuations about my personal morals began. At that time, I was certain that my patients were in the grip of painful memories which they had driven into their unconscious minds. I was also certain that these repressed memories were sexual in nature, almost always the seduction of the child by her own father. Dr. Breuer could not accept that. Other doctors were, to say the least, disdainful. I was alone. Then came a shattering discovery. Over the months and months of interviews, I gradually came to see that my patients' stories of childhood seductions were almost always simply not true. They were fantasies, no more. My brave theories were destroyed. But there is method in madness. The mind always has a purpose.
In search of this purpose, Freud looked also into his own unconscious. At that time, he was afraid of death, afraid to travel, afraid sometimes even to cross the street. He was victim of the same neurotic forces that ruled his patients. That gave incentive to his search. Yet he had been deceived by vivid but false stories of childhood seduction. Should he abandon his search? This was the turning point in his life and in his career. He asked himself a further, deeper question.
What is the purpose of fantasies of seduction? Perhaps the fantasies themselves are significant. Perhaps the fantasies themselves were significant. Oh, it's strange, but in spite of my troubles then, I had a peculiar feeling of victory, not of defeat. Fantasies are like dreams, and I was discovering that I could learn much from my patients' dreams. I resolved to explore dreams in a scientific way. Now, you know that dreams have always been an important part of art, religion, myth, folklore. But people were outraged when I showed that dreams were also a part of the reality of our own selves, a very important part. But dreams are never concerned with trivialities. We do not allow our sleep to be disturbed by trifles. My study of dreams took 5 years, and many of the dreams were my own. This is a dream I had when I was 7 or 8. And it was so vivid and frightening, I remembered it well and was able to analyze it years later. Even during the dream, I recognized my mother's bed. But those birds, what were they? What did they mean? And I recollected that a few days before my dream, I had seen an illustrated Bible with pictures of Egyptian gods with birds' heads taking part in funeral rites. The figure on the litter was, of course, my mother. And my terror was caused by fear that she was dead. It seems obvious, does it not? A simple fear of my mother's death. But this is only what I call the manifest meaning of the dream, the surface meaning. Even while we dream, our senses are at work disguising the true and forbidden meanings of our dreams. When I dug deeper, I found that the image on the litter was a memory of my dying grandfather. Grandfather? So perhaps I had placed my father on that funeral litter. And those birds had another meaning. A few days before my dream, I had been playing with Philip, a neighbor's boy. He was talking about sexual intercourse, and he used a vulgar term unknown to me. It was Vögeln in German. And it came directly from the German word for bird, Vogel. The forbidden meaning of the dream was revealed. The latent meaning, the hidden meaning censored by the conscious part of my dreaming mind. The anxiety disguised by the dream was sexual anxiety. My dream, really, was a jealous wish for the death of my father and desire for my mother.
Working with his patient's accounts of dreams and their free associations, and with his own dreams and associations, Freud developed the principles and techniques of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis, said Freud, showed that man has less control than he thinks over his irrational, unconscious, primitive urges. These urges, Freud believed, originate in our earliest years. Unlike other animals, humans are highly dependent for almost a quarter of their lives. In this world of dependency, particularly in the first 5 or 6 years of life, said Freud, the human personality is shaped. The child is psychologically the father of the man. Before Freud, it was seldom thought that a child could have real emotions, like an adult. Childhood was thought of as carefree, innocent, and happy. Freud drew another picture, an infant world that pulses with feelings. Brothers and sisters are resentful of the newcomer. Parents, consciously or unconsciously, may not want the child. Relations in the family are competitive, said Freud. The child is driven by desires and jealousies that cannot be appeased. So the feelings of the child are not childlike. They are feelings of aggression and erotic desire. These intense emotions naturally first focus on the mother. She becomes the first object of the child's love, and this relationship becomes a model for all later loves, whether the child is a boy or a girl. This erotic love, said Freud, is not unmixed. There is aggression in it too, for after all, the child is soon aware of being under the absolute rule of the mother. The father too provokes strong mixed emotions, said Freud. Love, yes, but fear and hatred too, when the child senses that the father is the rival who comes between the child and the mother. According to Freud, these early emotional turmoils set a pattern deep in our unconscious minds. A mother we love, but also fear because of her power over us. A father we love, but also hate, because he robs us of our first love.
This I called the Oedipus complex, after the tragic Greek king. That each man must desire his mother and wish to kill his father.
It was not until he was almost 50 that Freud was finally given the rank of professor, an appointment that required the approval of the Austrian emperor. Professorships seldom went to Jews or to radical thinkers.
It was as though the role of sexuality had suddenly been realized by His Majesty. The importance of dreams confirmed by the Council of Ministers, and the necessity of treating hysteria by psychoanalytic therapy accepted in Parliament by a 2/3 majority. I had become respectable again. Those who recently avoided me now greet me from afar in the street.
When Freud's views on sexuality in children became known, he was widely attacked for defiling the image of childhood innocence. But Victorian sentimentality often hid attitudes toward children that were unloving, rigid, and even cruel. Chiefly because of Freud, we came to see children as human beings. We became less sentimental about them, but in fact more truly kind than before. From his studies, Freud developed a theory of the human personality.
This is what I've discovered. There is the self we think we are, the self that attempts to deal with the outside world of reality. This self I call the ego. But ego is never the master of self, for we are constantly bedeviled by powerful unconscious forces in our beings. Before ego developed in us, there was id. Id. Id is all that is primitive and infantile within us. Id is the blind instincts of sexual desire and aggression. Id is opposed by another force that I call superego. Superego is rigid, punishing, and repressive, an inheritance from the repression of our parents and the restrictions that are part of the society we grow up in. So I found there are three distinct elements in our personalities. Ego, who deals with the world of reality, but who is also constantly affected by the demands of id and superego.
Just what do you mean you're not sure, David? Either you've got a firm commitment from Robertson or you haven't. Now, which is it? I happen to be in the position where I've got to know.
Well, Mr. Cooper, I'm certain he made a commitment. He didn't give anything in writing.
Oh, he didn't give you anything in writing. All those
Smash
things
him.
you get in writing,
I'll smash him.
contract.
I'll kill you, Father.
You must honor Father.
Yes.
And they can bring me back firm commitments. Now, don't interrupt me when I'm telling you how...
Your father is a good man, David. Everyone knows that.
Pick up the telephone.
Honor thy father. Honor thy father. Honor thy father.
I hate him. I hate him.
Honor thy father. Honor thy father, or you will be punished.
He stole Mummy away from me. I'm taking your mother away on a holiday, David. I hate him. I'll kill him. Oh, I love him.
Mr. Cooper, I'll go and see Mr. Robertson again. Thank you for letting me explain.
David's hate for Mr. Cooper is based on unconscious hate of his own father, caused by childhood jealousy, by the Oedipus complex. Freud said that without insight into these dark forces, we are doomed to play out our lives in an endless dramatization of our childhood relations with our parents.
It's great to be alone with you, Peggy.
In a restaurant?
Well, you know what I mean. Every time I go to your place, there's your roommate. Doesn't she ever go out?
Sometimes.
That's a nice dress, Peggy.
Thank you, David.
I want, warm. I want.
David, little gentleman, don't stare at ladies. You know better than that. Honor thy mother. Honor thy mother.
Would you like something to eat?
No, thanks. I've already eaten.
I want. There, David, baby. Put your head on Mummy's breast. I want. Warm. It's kind of boring here, isn't it?
Where else could we go, David?
I don't know. Do you have any ideas?
Well, we could go back to my place.
I want. Warm. I want.
Honor thy mother. Honor thy mother. David, David, what are you doing down in the basement with your sister?
Yeah, let's go. But you're sure it's all right? I mean, you're sure your roommate's out?
Yes.
Our childhood relations with our parents, said Freud, govern all our later affections and often fill them with anxiety. David obviously has little sense of his own identity. Ego's job is to meet the conflicting demands of reality, id, and superego, and still preserve its own true identity.
The struggles between id and superego can be the source of our growth and progress as individuals, but only if we are aware of them and understand them. Without that understanding of those half-tamed demons that live within us, we are enslaved by our unconscious drives and emotions. We are victims of our own past.
Our adult lives are profoundly influenced by the primitive emotions of our early years. This idea, revolutionary in Freud's own time, now is basic to man's understanding of himself and his civilization. Our awareness of these powerful forces at work in our unconscious minds may frighten us. But that knowledge may also liberate us, for now at least we can understand the origins of our irrational acts. In discovering these origins, Freud did not become cynical about man. He made man understandable without making him contemptible.
I have no consolation to offer, and very little hope. I offer only a limited sort of freedom. Freedom from illusion and from infantile attachments to the past. I propose the most difficult of all achievements. To be realistic about yourselves and to preserve your individual self from the savage powers within you and in your society.